Hi, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me here today. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some general tips about what to expect when you go to your first teacher interview. And then I'm going to do a second part of a video, and this one is going to be about the common interview questions that I have received when I've gone into the interview process. Now I know that there are a lot of you who are going into the education field, and maybe this is your first time interviewing, or you've been looking for a really long time like I did before I got hired in my first position. And so I know that it was really helpful for me to hear from other teachers who have gone through interviews about their experience, and just to give me some general ideas of what to expect when I went into my interview. So let's get started with what to expect when you go to the teacher interview. When you're ready to go to your interview, you should expect to arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. So what I really think you should do is punch it into your GPS the night before you go to your interview, and then add 10 or 15 minutes of time just to make sure you give yourself plenty of cushion if there's some random traffic, so that way it looks really good for you when you arrive early to your interview, because you definitely don't want to show up late to an interview. I showed up late to one interview. I actually got bumped by a car behind me, and it put me behind schedule, and I went to the interview. I was a little bit shaken up. The people were very kind when I got there, but ultimately I didn't get hired for that position. However, I probably didn't get hired because I was late. I probably ended up not getting hired just because I wasn't a good fit for the school, and that's okay. Also, when you get to the school site, just expect that you'll probably end up waiting in the hallway. A lot of times when they do teacher interviews, they're doing multiple interviews in a row, and so there's a good chance they could be behind in their interview schedule, and you'll end up having to wait in the hallway anyways. Additionally, I really highly recommend that you bring with you something like a black folio. So this is something that my master teacher told me in my credential program to always carry with me to meetings and teacher interviews. A black folio is simply like a leather folder. You can get this at like Walmart or Target or wherever you shop at an office supply store. And so this black folder, it looks really nice and professional. And inside of my black folio, I've always carried additional resumes as well as a copy of a sample lesson plan. Personally, I've never been asked to show these in an interview, but I just think it's really handy and helpful to have them for just in case, because I think it will make you really stand out from the other interviewees who are going for the same position, that you were extra prepared and had everything you needed, even though they didn't tell you to bring those materials. So when you get into the interview, expect that you're going to have a panel. A panel is typically made up from anywhere from 2 to 9 or 10 people. Now the people on the panel will vary from school to school and position to position, but most of the time you can expect that you will have the principal or the vice principal, sometimes both, in the interview. You'll have a department chair or a representative or two from the department that you are interviewing for. Sometimes you can even have the TOSAs, or the teacher coaches. We call our coaches a TOSA. It's a teacher on special assignment. And so additionally, I've also had district office personnel be on an interview panel, though that was for a really small school district that I interviewed for. When you're in the interview and the panel is all set up and they seat you, sometimes they'll give you a bottle of water, sometimes they don't. But a lot of the times in interviews that I have participated in, they've slid across the table or had it right in front of me, and this is a piece of paper that has all of the interview questions on it. I have found that this is really helpful so that I can actually see the questions as they read them to me. It just gives me a little bit of extra time to process the information that they want from me as they're reading it. Now, in a panel interview, typically each person on the panel will take a turn asking one of the questions, and you will give your answer. Sometimes, and this is important to be prepared for, sometimes your interview is timed, and that can be extra nerve-wracking because you have to give some really concise answers, but you really want to show who you are and what you believe as a teacher to determine if you're a good fit for this school. And so you really want to take the time to think through your answer, but you want to do it quickly and concisely. However, I have been in interviews where they are not timed. And one time I was in an interview that lasted for 2 hours. It was a really good interview. I really loved the school and they did offer me a position. I worked there for 2 years before my husband and I moved to be closer to his family once we had our son. Really liked the school, but boy, was that a long interview. And the more time I spent at that school and got to know other teachers and we talked about our interview experience, it was pretty common for all the teachers who had been hired that they did have a very long interview process. But that was a private Christian school where we were not only interviewing and sharing about our life as a teacher and our beliefs, but we were also sharing our spiritual aspect to who we were as people. And so I think that's probably why the interview went longer, because we were sharing a lot more about ourselves as teachers and people. Let's talk about what to wear. Now, what to wear is really important when you're going to an in-person interview. The first time I ever interviewed, I didn't have anything to wear. And so what I did was I went to a store that I knew had really great professional clothing that was at an affordable price for someone who was unemployed. So I went to the Limited. And I didn't know anything about dressing professionally as a teacher, so I just asked one of the ladies who was working if she could help me pick out an interview outfit. So she took my sizes and went around the store and picked out a bunch of skirts and jackets that would match, that I could try on to figure out what looked good on me. And what was extra nice about this experience is that she also offered to stand in the dressing room with me and let me come out and tell me how things were fitting, because I had never worn a suit before and I definitely wasn't buying a tailored suit because, like I said, I was unemployed and didn't have any money. So she wanted to help me make sure I had the best fit that I could get at the best price that I could get as well. And so that was really nice. She helped me pick out this interview outfit. And to be honest, it's the only skirt suit that I own, and I have worn it to every teacher interview I've ever been to, which is okay, because why change something if it works, right? Also, because first impressions are really important, you want to make sure that your hair and your makeup look really nice. So whatever that means to you, just make sure it looks nice, because you want to give a first impression when you walk through the room and you meet the interview panel. If you're a man, I highly recommend that you always wear a tie or a bow tie, whatever you like. Just make sure that you are dressed up really nicely, because that's going to make you stand out from the other people who are interviewing. Now let's talk about how to prepare for the interview. So I highly recommend that you go onto the school's website and you research the school's mission statement and their vision statement, and really digest this vision and mission statement, because you want to understand who this school is and what their goals are for their students. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart as an educator, and just know I understand what it's like to just have graduated college and be so excited and desperate for a job because you really need one. But it is not worth it to go after and get hired and work at a school where you are not a good fit for them and they are not a good fit for you. In my first year of teaching, I wish that I had said no to the first position that I had been offered. This was a position at a charter school where they gave me 6 different classes to teach. And I don't just mean I taught 6 periods in the day. I mean I taught 9th grade English, 8th grade English, 6th grade English, 9th grade Writer's Workshop, 6th grade Ancient Civilizations, and 7th grade Health, with I'm not even credentialed to teach. And it was crazy because there was no curriculum for these classes except for the history class, which had TCI, which was amazing. I love TCI for history. Now, yes, there was a teacher coach, and I did get matched with like a bits of mentor, but the problem with the school was that they were really data driven, but they were not providing me the content support that I needed as a brand new teacher. Yes, I had gone through a credential program. I was at the top of my program. I was a great student. I loved the idea of being a teacher. I loved my student teaching experience. I excelled. But in all of those experiences, I had curriculum to guide me and point me in the direction that I needed to go as an educator. When I got into my first year of teaching, there was no teacher guide. There was no textbook. There was nothing to tell me that this literature is on Lexile for 6th grade or 8th grade or 9th grade. Nothing to tell me what was developmentally appropriate for each of the grades. Nothing to tell me that these passages could be paired together and had common themes. So I was literally doing all of the research for these classes. I was working 15 to 16 hours a day just to teach the lessons for tomorrow. That wasn't planning for my week, that was just planning for the next day, and then I did it again. And it became a really awful situation for me where I was set up for failure again and again, and I was blamed for the failures of my students in my classroom. I developed really severe anxiety. I didn't have adequate support for behavior management on top of the content problem that I was facing. And so I really wish that looking back I had said no to that, and that I even knew as a new teacher that that school was not a good fit for me. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is really do your research and determine if you feel like that school aligns with what you believe and your philosophy as an educator, and then make sure in that interview that they have curriculum to at least guide you as a teacher if you're a brand new teacher. If you're a teacher who's been around a while, maybe you know and you do your own thing, and that's okay, but I just remember what it was like to be a brand new teacher and have zero idea what I needed to do because there was nothing to guide me and point me in that direction. So research this school. And what I really like to do is take down some notes about key words or phrases that they include in their mission statement or their vision statement, and really integrate those into my answers when I give my interview. So for example, if the school really values collaboration between staff members, then I want to really emphasize how I collaborate with other teachers. If the school really values group work or student talk, then I really want to integrate that into my answers and my interview wherever I can, because I really want to emphasize and show how I'm a good fit for that school. Now, my attitude when I'm interviewing is that I am interviewing that school just as much as they are interviewing me. And so that's why I spend so much time researching the school site before I go in, and I prepare questions that I'm going to ask of the interview panel myself. Something else that I do to prepare for interviews is I create interview flashcards. And so these interview flashcards are made up of common interview questions that I researched and found on the internet. Now, I just looked these questions up and I read these on like teacher blogs or teacher websites, and I read teacher answers to the questions because in the beginning I didn't really have a lot of experience outside of student teaching with the classroom. I didn't attend any IEP meetings. I didn't know what RTI was. I didn't know a ton about supporting English learners, although I did teach a SEDI class, but all my students were right about the same level, so I didn't really do a lot of differentiation because all my students were on the same level. And so I didn't have a lot of experience as a student teacher with a lot of the questions that they were asking in a teacher interview. So for me, I thought it was really important that I created flashcards with each of these questions on there. And then on the back, what I would do is I would write my answers to those questions to help me really flesh out what I believed as an educator, and to find creative ways where I could show how I am competent as a teacher. So even though I lacked the personal experience, I still had a lot of the knowledge and theory background that supported me as an educator. And so this is one of my favorite tools to study or help teachers be successful, and it's what I always recommend teachers do when they're preparing for the teacher interview. And so I made these flashcards, and then what I would do after I wrote my answers is I would sit down and I would study these cards like crazy, because I wanted to make sure that when I answered a question in an interview, I gave a really solid answer that came from confidence as an educator. So I took this stack of interview cards and I kept it in my purse, and I would study them in line at the bank. If it was a long line, I'd study in line at the grocery store. I'd study at the DMV if I had to be there for hours all day. I'd study them at home on commercials if I'm watching a show, and then I'd have my husband help me study as well, so that way I had someone to listen to my answers, and occasionally I would ask him for feedback on my answers if it was clear or concise enough. So that's what I have for you in the part 1 of this video series, because I think it's important that you don't just understand that you're going to be asked questions in the teacher interview, that you really need to set yourself up for success even before you go to your interview. So just remember, you need to be prepared when you go to your interview. So make sure you've studied your questions, you've written out your answers. You need to make sure you dress professionally and appropriately for whatever position that is that you're going for. And then you also need to make sure that you have the expectations right in your mind of what you're going to be walking into when you go into your interview. Now, the second part of the video series that I'm going to share with you is going to contain common interview questions that I have been personally asked in the interview and how I would answer those questions. I just think it's helpful sometimes just to hear other people's perspective and how they would answer questions, because I know as a new teacher, because I didn't have a lot of background experience in teaching other than my student teaching, it was really difficult sometimes to even figure out what did they want from me when they were asking these interview questions. Don't forget to hit subscribe down below so you don't miss that second video about the teacher interview experience. Also, if you have any comments down below that you want to add of things to expect or questions about the interview experience itself, please leave those and I'll answer them. I'm also going to copy into the description section that list of questions that I have personally been asked in interviews, because I think that you should also make your own flashcards or at least write down your answers to those common interview questions to help you build that confidence and feel more prepared as a teacher when you walk into your interview. I hope these tips are helpful. Please let me know down below in the comments, and stay tuned and look out for that second video. Have a nice day.